Deep within the uncharted subterranean continent, the air hung heavy with the scent of ancient dust and volatile raw magic. Stetch, Atelier knelt silently on the fractured stone path to examine a pulsing elemental energy fracture. He adjusted the heavy leather strap of his scouting pack as he sensed an unnatural tremor rippling through the deep ground. Behind him, Prince Gerald stepped forward with loud, heavy metallic footsteps that echoed arrogantly across the chamber walls. The prince raised his glowing broadsword and ordered the elite vanguard knights to pick up their marching pace. Stetch turned around sharply to warn the royal party about the lethal magical traps hidden in the floors ahead. Gerald simply scoffed at the warnings and gestured for his heavily armored knights to push past the expert guide. Suddenly, a massive stone tile sank into the floor, triggering a barrage of lethal crystal spikes from the walls. Stetch spun instantly through the air, drawing his dual short blades to deflect a stray razor-sharp crystal fragment. The royal knights shielded their faces as the lethal trap spent its energy against their heavy iron shields. Gerald laughed loudly at the minor setback, proud of his vanguard's raw defensive capabilities. Stetch ignored the arrogance and focused entirely on tracking the strong mana trail leading to the legendary boss room. They finally stood before a pair of colossal iron doors engraved with ancient, weeping skull motifs. Gerald grinned with raw malice, knowing the ultimate legendary artifact lay right behind this final barrier. Stetch channeled his aura into the unlocking mechanism, causing the ancient heavy locks to violently snap open one by one. The heavy doors groaned open to reveal an enormous crystalline guardian beast awakening from a millennia of deep slumber. The guardian roared fiercely, sending a massive shockwave of pure concussive force across the entire raiding party. Stetch dashed forward ahead of everyone, utilizing his unmatched speed to draw the monster's immediate aggro. The guardian slammed its massive crystal fist down, shattering the ground exactly where Stetch stood a millisecond prior. Gerald ordered his backline wizards to immediately begin casting high-tier explosive destruction spells. Giant fireballs rained down onto the guardian, filling the massive chamber with suffocating smoke and burning ash. Stetch used the thick smoke screen to scale the beast's rocky spine, seeking its hidden weak spot. He spotted a pulsing core of raw crystalline mana embedded right between the creature's massive shoulders. With a decisive double strike, Stetch drove his twin daggers deep into the core, fracturing it completely. The guardian wailed in agony before collapsing into a mountain of inanimate stone chunks and shimmering dust. Stetch dropped safely back to the ground, panting heavily while sheathing his hot, drained weapons. Prince Gerald rushed past him immediately, his eyes entirely locked onto a floating, ancient skull-faced ring left behind. The prince snatched the relic from the air, a dark and wicked smile stretching across his royal face. Stetch walked slowly toward the prince, requesting the agreed-upon scouting payment for safely delivering them to the core. Gerald turned slowly around, looking down at the commoner explorer with supreme disgust and dark malice. He stated flatly that common scum had no right to share the glory of a legendary royal dungeon conquest. Stetch froze in pure disbelief as the elite royal knights suddenly surrounded him with drawn weapons. With a sudden swift movement, Gerald channeled his high-tier light magic and lunged forward without mercy. The massive blade pierced clean through Stetch's chest armor, shattering his internal mana circuit in an instant. Stetch stumbled backward, blood dripping heavily from his lips as he clutched his ruptured chest cavity. Gerald kicked Stetch violently in the chest, sending him flying backward over the edge of the deep central chasm. The background vanished into a blur as Stetch fell rapidly into the pitch black, freezing void below. Up above, Gerald ordered his powerful mages to collapse the entire cavern ceiling to bury the evidence forever. Thousands of tons of jagged boulders rained down into the abyss, sealing the path to the surface completely. As total silence and suffocating darkness consumed his dying body, Stetch's hand brushed against something cold, bouncing in the abyss. A sharp, agonizing shockwave of absolute pain jolted Stetch back into conscious reality. He clutched his aching chest tightly as he realized his heart was beating with an unnatural, heavy thumping rhythm. Black, parasitic tendrils of dark energy were actively weaving underneath his pale skin, like living liquid obsidian. On his right ring finger, a strange skeletal artifact pulsated with an intense, mesmerizing amethyst light. A raspy, ancient voice echoed directly inside the deepest chambers of his mind. The voice welcomed him back from the absolute brink of permanent death. Stetch demanded to know what kind of entity had invaded his physical body. The entity introduced itself as Momento Mortem, a legendary mythical symbiotic relic born from ancient darkness. It explained that Prince Gerald's betrayal had completely shattered Stetch's physical soul core. Without the intervention of the relic, Stetch's life would have dissolved into nothingness hours ago. Suddenly, a burning sensation rippled through Stetch's entire nervous system. Momento Mortem warned that this soul-repairing link required an immense constant influx of raw magical energy to survive. If his internal mana pool ever emptied completely, the symbiotic link would consume his heart. Stetch forced himself to stand up on his trembling legs, refusing to give up his chance for revenge. The memory of Prince Gerald smirking as he sealed the exit chamber fueled Stetch's dying willpower. A low, rumbling vibration echoed from the dark tunnel directly ahead of him. The ring whispered that potential food was approaching quickly from the dark. A massive, hound-like beast composed entirely of sharp, jagged crystals emerged from the shadows. Stetch reached for his side only to find his trusty steel sword had been shattered into useless fragments during the fall. Momento Mortem laughed internally and offered to manifest a new weapon of absolute death. The symbiotic liquid instantly solidified into a terrifying, jagged blade of pure dark energy. The crystal hound roared fiercely and lunged directly across the cavern with blinding speed. Driven by an instinctual combat reflex, Stetch sidestepped the heavy assault flawlessly. He swung the dark blade downward, slicing clean through the beast's dense crystal foreleg. The monster screeched in agony as shattered glowing minerals rained down onto the rocky floor. The ring urged him to finish the strike and consume the creature's raw essence immediately. With a single decisive thrust, Stetch drove the dark blade directly into the hound's glowing mana core. A surging current of pure, unrefined magical energy rushed straight up the blade and into Stetch's body. The suffocating tightness inside his broken chest relaxed instantly as his internal mana reservoir refilled. The crystal hound's physical remains withered away, turning into useless gray ash within seconds. Stetch realized that he had officially become a true predator within this deep, forgotten ecosystem. Momento Mortem reminded him that a single hound's life force would only sustain him for a brief period. To fully repair his shattered soul permanent damage, he needed to hunt far greater prey. Stetch adjusted his torn cloak and stepped firmly into the treacherous, unexplored pathway. He asked the relic if it knew any safe path leading back up to the surface world. The entity replied that the only way out was straight through the heart of the dungeon's nest. He would have to slaughter every monstrosity that guarded the lower high-potency mana zones. Stetch welcomed the challenge, realizing this violence would make him strong enough to kill a prince. Together, the symbiotic Avenger and the Death Relic began their relentless descent into the abyssal depths. But far deeper in the cavern floor, a massive, ancient sealed door suddenly began to crack open with an ominous, earth-shaking roar. The monstrous stone doors groaned as jagged fissures tore across their ancient, weathered surfaces. Stetch gripped his throbbing chest as the ground violently trembled beneath his heavy boots. Inside his mind, the rasping voice of Momento Mortem urged him to prepare for an incoming influx of raw, volatile energy. A massive shockwave of pure, unfiltered mana blasted outward from the breaking threshold. The sudden concentration of high-potency magical radiation forced Stetch down to his hands and knees. Grotesque mineral beasts with sharp crystalline spikes suddenly emerged from the darkness of the newly opened chamber. The leading creature bared its jagged stone fangs and let out a deafening metallic screech. Stetch tried to summon his standard explorer magic, but his fractured life force refused to respond. The symbiotic ring pulsed violently, sending a flood of black ichor surging up his right arm. Embracing the dark artifact's power, Stetch stood up as the black veins mutated his physical form. A heavy mineral hound leaped through the air directly toward his exposed throat. With his newly heightened reflexes, Stetch easily sidestepped the creature's clumsy, heavy attack. He thrust his mutated hand forward, sprouting sharp symbiotic blades that pierced the beast's rocky armor. The monster shattered into hundreds of dull, lifeless stones as its core was utterly crushed. A stream of vibrant red mana rose from the dead creature and flowed directly into Stetch's ring. A warm, refreshing sensation spread through his body as his dying life force temporarily stabilized. However, the rest of the pack noticed the death of their kin and began circling him warily. Momento Mortem whispered malicious encouragement, urging Stetch to slaughter them all for a greater feast. Two mineral beasts charged simultaneously from opposite sides in a coordinated pincer movement. Stetch waited until the absolute last second, calculating their trajectory with cold precision. He slammed both hands onto the ground, bursting thick symbiotic tendrils outward from the stone floor. The dark spikes impaled the charging monsters midair, suspending their heavy bodies above the ground. With a clenched fist, Stetch commanded the tendrils to violently retract, dragging the remaining beasts into the melee. Within minutes, the entire pack of mineral beasts lay reduced to a massive pile of shattered crystals. A massive vortex of extracted mana swirled around Stetch as he absorbed the combined energy of the pack. The pure magical absorption triggered a sudden, painful evolution within his symbiotic biology. Feeling completely reborn, Stetch looked deeper into the high-potency mana zone ahead. The air grew immensely heavy, suffocatingly dense with ancient malevolent power. From the center of the high-potency zone, a gargantuan entity began to materialize from the crystals. The true dungeon boss, an ancient obsidian golem, let out a roar that caused massive stalactites to fall. Stetch readied his stance, the symbiotic blades on his forearms extending to their absolute maximum length. The golem slammed its massive obsidian fist downward, completely obliterating the ground where Stetch stood. Stetch leaped high into the air, using the rising dust cloud as a perfect tactical screen. He brought his dark blades down hard against the golem's shoulder, but the dense obsidian skin resisted. The golem swatted him away like an insect, sending him crashing heavily into a stone pillar. Coughing up blood, Stetch realized standard physical attacks would never pierce its thick hide. Momento Mortem laughed, telling him to inject the symbiotic virus directly into the cracks of the armor. Stetch gathered all his remaining strength for one definitive high-speed final strike. He slid beneath the golem's legs and drove a thin, concentrated tendril straight into a glowing magma fissure. The black corruption spread instantly throughout the boss's interior network, overpowering its mana core. With a spectacular explosion of dark magic, the ancient obsidian golem completely collapsed into dust. A colossal sphere of highly concentrated boss mana floated down into Stetch's outstretched palm. As he consumed the boss core, the dungeon's high-potency mana zone began to violently collapse. Seizing the massive burst of energy, Stetch launched himself upward toward a faint glimmer of surface sunlight. But as his feet finally touched the grass of the surface world, a lethal elven arrow zipped through the air and embedded itself right before his feet. The vibration of the elven arrow still hummed against the morning air as Stetch froze on the edge of the forest boundary. From the dense emerald canopy above, a tall female elf with piercing silver eyes and a drawn recurved bow materialized silently among the branches. Inside Stetch's mind, the dark consciousness of Momento Mortem rippled with an eager, hunger-filled urge to strike the challenger down immediately. Stetch raised his hands in a slow, deliberate gesture of peace to signify he meant no harm to the woodland sentinel. The elven hunter Elena demanded to know how a human corrupted by such deep abyssal energy had managed to bypass the ancient perimeter seals. Stetch explained that he was merely a survivor of Prince Gerald's treacherous expedition seeking passage back to the civilized realms. At the mention of Prince Gerald's name, Elena lowered her bow slightly, her expression hardening with an old, familiar hatred. She revealed that Gerald's warmongering forces had recently slaughtered an entire elven clan along the border under the guise of an expedition. Realizing they shared a common, highly placed enemy, Stetch proposed a strategic alliance to dismantle the prince's power structure from the shadows. Elena stared intently at the dark aura radiating from Stetch's soulbound ring before slowly nodding her assent to the dangerous pact. Meanwhile, inside the Grand Royal Capital, Prince Gerald was currently marching into the High Council chamber to claim the rewards of his supposed triumph. The prince knelt arrogantly before the elderly king, presenting a fabricated report detailing how he single-handedly conquered the ancient dungeon. Suddenly, the heavy chamber doors burst open as a battered royal scout rushed inside holding an urgent, highly confidential message. The scout loudly announced that the dungeon core had not been purified at all, but was completely harvested by a mysterious dark entity. The old king slammed his heavy golden scepter onto the marble floor, demanding to know why Gerald had lied about the expedition's true outcome. Prince Gerald's face turned completely pale as he realized his elaborate web of deceit was instantly unraveling before the entire court. Outraged by the public dishonor and economic ruin, the king stripped Gerald of his military command and placed him under strict house arrest. From the high stone rafters overlooking the capital city, Stetch watched through a scrying eye spell as his betrayer was humiliated. Momento Mortem purred with dark satisfaction inside his mind, feeling the immense emotional turmoil radiating from their distant target. Elena appeared beside him on the roof, informing him that Gerald's elite personal estate guards were currently disorganized and vulnerable. Deciding to strike while the iron was hot, Stetch stood up and prepared to launch the first direct assault on Gerald's private sanctuary. Under the dark shroud of a moonless midnight, the two infiltrators slipped silently over the tall, spiked walls of the prince's estate. Elena moved like a ghost through the shadows, neutralizing the patrolling perimeter guards with swift, non-lethal strikes to their pressure points. Stetch followed closely behind, using his symbiotic dark tentacles to effortlessly disarm and restrain the remaining courtyard sentries. They quickly breached the heavy oak doors of the central mansion, stepping into a grand foyer lined with expensive historical artifacts. Prince Gerald sat alone in his darkened study, frantically drinking wine until the heavy wooden doors suddenly splintered into pieces. Out of the billowing smoke and dust, Stetch stepped forward with his glowing purple eyes fixed squarely onto his former commander. Gerald scrambled backward over his desk, stammering in absolute disbelief as he recognized the man he had left to rot in the abyss. The prince drew a hidden golden dagger and lunged desperately, screaming that a mere commoner like Stetch should have died in the dark. With an effortless flick of his wrist, Stetch caught the blade bare-handed, the symbiotic skin of Memento Mortem completely neutralizing the impact. A barrage of dark, thorny tendrils erupted from Stetch's shadow, instantly binding Gerald's limbs and pinning him firmly against the stone wall. Elena stepped into the room, holding a glowing crystal orb that was actively recording Gerald's panicked confessions of his various crimes. Bounded and trapped, Gerald wept and begged Stetch for mercy, offering half of his stolen royal inheritance in exchange for his pathetic life. Stetch leaned in close, whispering that the Abyss does not accept bribes before using his artifact to permanently sever Gerald's core. As Gerald collapsed into a completely magicless state of permanent weakness, the heavy burden of Stetch's long quest finally lifted. Elena deactivated the recording orb, knowing this evidence would permanently secure the freedom and safety of her elven tribes forever. With their shared vengeance thoroughly fulfilled, the duo walked out of the burning mansion and back into the cool night air. Look over the horizon, Stetch felt the symbiotic ring pulse not with a ravenous hunger, but with a stable, harmonious energy bond. No longer an exiled explorer left to die in the dark, he had become the ultimate master of his own destiny. Secure in his newly forged power and surrounded by reliable allies, Stetch stepped forward into a bright, boundless new future.